It can be so fun to make wood do things that it doesn't naturally want to do. And sometimes you whisper to it, other times you have to scream.
The Wood Whisperer is sponsored by Woodcraft. Just get started.
The technique I use to make this is called bent lamination. It's one of my favorite woodworking techniques. You basically cut the wood into very thin strips and you glue it back together in a stack around a bending form. And the bending form is pretty simple. You just have to have the shape that you want, some cauls that are the other part of the shape, and then you can clamp this guy together. So let me show you how we make this, because this is where it all begins.
So what I'm building here is a spa-style towel rack for our bathroom. We don't have much storage in there, so this is going to hold 6 clean towels without looking cluttered. I've got the basic dimensions in mind, so I'm drawing the shape directly onto the material for the bending form. I'm cutting it with my usual tools, but honestly, this would have been a perfect job for the CNC. I still haven't fully integrated CNC into my workflow, partly because I know a lot of you don't have one. Maybe I'm overthinking that. Let me know what you think in the comments. The first piece becomes the template. I'm stacking 3 layers to get the thickness that I need. The remaining pieces get cut slightly oversized, glued and nailed together, and then flush trimmed at the router table one at a time. For the mating half of the form, I need a complementary curve that accounts for the 1/2 inch thickness of the bent part. You could use a compass for the offset, but sometimes the universe throws you a bone and you find a washer that's the perfect size. Pretty foolproof too. You might notice that I could have used that interior cutout for the first part of the form. Fair point. It's my first real project in a couple of months, so you'll have to forgive me for not having my brain fully engaged. Now, I'm trimming the legs off here. That's going to make more sense later on. Assembly is just like the first part. For extra support and stability, I'm going to mount the form to a larger piece of plywood, and all the surfaces get covered with packing tape to prevent sticking.
Now, with the form made, we have to start thinking about our laminations. Now, I know I want this final piece to be a 1/2 inch thick, so how many pieces should I use to get to that 1/2 inch? Are we talking like 5 pieces, 10 pieces? All right, so here I have 2 samples. This one is 1/8 of an inch thick, and I'll try to bend it to the form. You can kind of see that it does bend, but it's not really happy about it, and it isn't likely to take this shape without breaking. Oops. Now the next sample is just 0.045 inches thick, and you can see that it behaves pretty differently under pressure. It's got no problem taking this shape. So the thinner you go, the crazier the shapes can be, but you do want to be kind of careful. If you go too thin, these pieces just become a pain to work with. You just have a lot of extra work to do. So you want to go with the thickest possible lamination that doesn't cause problems. So one of the problems we already discussed is breakage. We want to avoid that, but we also want to avoid springback. As the pieces get a little bit thicker, you might be able to get them to take the shape under clamping pressure, but once the glue dries and you remove your clamps, you could end up with it springing back just a little bit. So imagine this nice 90-degree angle here, which is really important for this project. Imagine if they just kind of flared out a little bit at the ends. So we want to avoid that as well. So of course it's a good idea to do a test piece so you can see how many laminations work and what the results are. In my case here, we do have 11 laminations and they're about 0.045 inches in thickness. That worked just fine on this test piece, so that's what I'm going to continue to do.
I've got some beautifully figured walnut for this, but not enough to make the rungs entirely from it. So the outermost lamination will be the figured stuff, and the inner layers will be a more straightforward walnut. No sense in wasting the good material where you don't see it. Before cutting laminations, I like to make sure that the bandsaw is tuned up and waxed, and I double check that the fence is square to the table. I cut a strip, joint the fresh face, and then head back to the bandsaw for the next cut. That's a rinse and repeat thing until there's nothing left. Sometimes that last strip is paper thin and basically useless, but hey, it's fun to wiggle around. Each strip gets cleaned up at the drum sander and brought to final thickness. Now I don't obsess over the individual measurements, instead I stack them up and then check the total. If we're close to a 1/2 inch, we're good.
So I've got my laminations ready to go. The thing is, the drum sander at least the grit that I have on there, it's a little bit too low, so I end up with lots of lines and sort of machine marks on the surface that I do want to get out with some hand sanding.
When sanding, I focus on removing the hazy, straight lines left by the drum sander. On figured grain, those lines usually show up in repeating patterns, so I keep sanding until they disappear.
All right, once that's looking pretty good, I'll pop up to the next grit. And then we'll finalize with some 220.
For the glue up, I apply glue to just one face of each strip, keeping them in order. Taping them down to the bench is a tip that I picked up from my buddy Phil Morley. We released a course together last year called Mastering Bent Lamination, so if you want to go deeper into this technique, I'll put a link below. I'm using Titebond cold press glue applied with a little roller. Open time matters here, and the roller really speeds things up. And if you wash the roller, you can use it more than once. Once the glue's on, I can restack the strips in order and wrap some tape around the bundle to keep it aligned. Then I can move over to the bending form. 2 clamps will bring the form halves together. You don't want to rush, but you also don't want the glue to set up too early. The nice thing is that water-based glue can soften the fibers slightly, making the strips a little bit more flexible. As long as the glue is still workable, taking your time can actually help to a point. Now you can see why I trimmed the legs off the form earlier. If they ran full length, this part would have been much harder to squeeze together. In fact, I'm not actually even sure how it would go, but the segmented form, it just seems like a smart way to do it. The shortened version handles most of the bend, and then I can use straight blocks on the sides to finish it off.
All right, so I'm going to let this sit in the clamps overnight. If I can give this a full 24 hours, I will. The longer you let it sit in there, just the safer it is that everything's going to be firmly bonded when we take the clamps off. The trick here is I have to do this 3 times, and if I did give 24 hours each time, that means just doing these glue ups is going to take me 3 days. So it just kind of depends on your priorities. In some cases, it may be worth it to build more than one form, but for a one-off like this, I gotta go the slow way, so I'll see you after I do this 2 additional times, which will probably be sometime next week.
Well, since we have 3 days to wait, I may as well tell you about an awesome new course coming to the Wood Whisperer Guild.
Are you intimidated by built-ins? I was too. In fact, the first time that I tried to make a built-in, I just couldn't wrap my head around how we build something perfect in the shop and then install it into a space in a home that's anything but perfect. So after doing more than a few of these myself, I'm ready to share my techniques in a new course called Demystifying Built-ins. Now let's be honest, even if you're a decent woodworker, built-ins require a whole different skill set. And I'm going to show you how to do it using this beautiful walnut desk that I made for my wife. We'll start by evaluating the existing space, making a template for the desktop, and removing the old desk so that we can take all of the appropriate measurements. I'll then show you how to take that information and put it into SketchUp where we can begin to design the desk while working within our real-world restrictions. Back in the shop, we'll build all the components using dowels as our primary joinery. And finally, we'll walk through installation, including how to get tight professional scribes that make the desk look seamless against walls that are crooked as a dog's hind leg. And while I don't expect anyone to actually build this exact desk, my goal here is to give you a repeatable process that you can use for any built-in in your home. This course launches on March 20th, and if you get your pre-order in now, you can not only get the special pre-order price, you'll also be able to choose between 2 awesome bonuses. Either a classic General Tools scribe, which you can use to scribe your own built-in projects, or a pack of our double-sided backside sandpaper, which you can use to smooth your surfaces before finishing. If you've ever looked at a space in your home and thought, I wish I could build something custom for that, well, this course is a great starting point. I'll see you in the guild.
With bent laminations, you really have to think ahead about post-processing. After the glue up, you're left with squeeze out and uneven edges, and it's not always obvious how to clean that up safely. First, I knock down the glue with a random orbit sander. Normally, I'd head to the jointer to true one edge, but look at this shape. There's just no safe way to run it over the jointer. Now you could flatten one side with a hand plane or even sandpaper stuck to a known flat surface. In my case, I'm just going to use the drum sander. Now what you might not realize yet is that each laminated blank actually contains 2 rungs. Once I have one clean edge, I could take it to the table saw and cut it in half. I usually cut curved laminations at the bandsaw, but this shape loops back on itself and I couldn't find a safe approach. The table saw is a little bit sketchy here, but it gets the job done without too much drama. Afterward, I clean up the cut edges at the drum sander. To trim the excess off the back of the rungs, I disassemble the bending form and use it to support the pieces at the table saw for a clean, consistent cut. That's often the trick with bent laminations, using the form itself as a guide or a holding fixture for the next operation. Each rung now gets a round over after I mark where it needs to stop. The back of the rungs will sit in notches, so that portion stays square. The rest of the rack is simple, 2 uprights and 3 cross pieces, pretty minimal. Quick tip for curly wood: orientation matters. One board can look completely different just by flipping it. Always check before you commit so that the figure goes the way that you want it to go. With the uprights clamped together, I lay out the notches and cut them at the table saw. Now, you guys know I have a saw stop, right? Just kidding. I had plenty of room. Sorry, saw stop owners, didn't mean to scare you. The first cut is just a test to dial in the width and depth. That's perfect. Now I should mention that the sacrificial fence is pretty critical here. The exit side of that cut will be visible, so tear out just is not an option. The cross pieces join the uprights with classic mortise and tenon joints. Not dominoes, not dowels, just good old mortise and tenon. Now I love the dust collection on Festool routers, but sometimes you actually need to see your layout lines. On small parts like this, I'll often skip the dust collection so that I can see what the heck I'm doing. Other times, I throw caution to the wind and hope that I hit my lines. For the tenons, the key dimension is shoulder to shoulder. That determines where the uprights sit in space. I get that measurement directly from the work, holding the rung flush to the outside of the uprights and measuring the span between them. Once that's set, I can then cut the tenons. With a square tenon and a rounded mortise, you have 3 options. You could square the mortise, which I don't find particularly enjoyable. You could do nothing at all and just live with the gap. I mean, where's it going to go? Or you round over your tenons for a nice snug fit, which is usually my preferred method. But truth is, there's no right answer. With a quick dry assembly, I can mark where the roundover should start and stop and lay out the curved ends on the uprights. This is our last chance to finish sand everything before glue up. Backside sandpaper coming in clutch. For glue, I'm using Titebond 3. Strength isn't a concern here, but water resistant is, so it's a great fit for a bathroom project. I assemble the back frame first, then add the rungs. Towels aren't heavy, but seating each rung fully into its notch makes the whole structure incredibly strong for its size and shape. And hopefully my kids are past the point where they're going to be tempted to climb this thing like a ladder. No guarantees with me. Since nothing's ever perfect, some of the rungs need a little bit of persuasion. A quick trim with a block plane does the trick. When it comes to squeeze out, I let it sit for about 15 to 20 minutes, and once it gels over, I can pop it off with a chisel or a scraper, and then it doesn't smear the glue everywhere. After the final sanding, I can drill and countersink holes for the mounting screws. For the finish, I'm using Natural One Coat. It's similar to Rubio, but more affordable, and in my testing, just as good if not better. I've got a hard wax oil comparison video if you want to dive deeper, links in the description. That walnut really comes alive once it absorbs the oil. I would say that watching walnut transform from a boring gray to this beautiful dark brown is definitely in my top 10 list of things that I love about woodworking. Not even sure what the other 9 are, but I'm sure there's 9 of them. Even though these finishes claim to be single coat coverage, I always apply 2. It adds a touch more sheen and makes the piece feel more finished. So it's funny, this thing seemed huge to me in the shop, but in the house, it kind of looks small. But I am confident in my measurements. Maybe someday we'll have the opportunity to renovate the bathroom and have some better built-in towel storage, but for now, this does the job. And honestly, this is one of those deeply satisfying projects. It solves a real problem in my own home and lets me use some of my favorite woodworking techniques. Job done. And just a quick shout out to our sponsor Woodcraft for helping support the show. Did you know that there's always something going down at your local Woodcraft store? Visit their store locator to find out more, and be sure to use our code TWW2026 at checkout for 10% off. Exclusions apply. See you next time.